Good morning. So today's midlife conversation is something super special because we're going to be talking about weddings in midlife. But of course, it's not just about that because when you think about weddings, you think about love, you think about expectation and hope and I don't know, putting it all on red and hoping you've picked a winner and all these kind of things. So my guest today is the perfect person to talk about this. So Siobhan Craven-Robins is a wedding planner. She specializes in bringing you the best possible experience when it comes to orchestrating, putting together on the day, making sure everything runs smoothly when it comes to your wedding. And not only that, but she lectures in it and she runs an accredited course to do with wedding planning as well. So, Siobhan, you're not just someone who turns up and goes, right, groom side sit over there, bride side sit over there, plonk the flowers over there, and then it's all done. It is a much bigger gig than that, isn't it?
It is, yeah. Hi, Andrea. I wish it was that simple. Or no, not really, actually. I think one of the main things about being a wedding planner is that you are detail orientated. So I'd be woefully bored if it was as simple as seating guests and popping some flowers down. So, but no, just as you said, it's the whole spectrum of the planning from start to finish. So most of the time, clients will come not having chosen a venue. Sometimes they have and got a date and then thought, how do we go from here? But usually it's from finding the venue right through to obviously being there on the day as well.
So when people come to you, what's the sort of first process? Because, I have to hold my hands up and say I've been married 3 times. So yes, I'm the first person to get in there before people make the joke of, oh, you clearly love wedding cake. Yes, love wedding cake. But in my circumstances, so I got married in my 20s, in my 40s, and no, my 20s, my 30s, and my 40s. So, wedding a decade. Didn't plan it that way. However, each one was so different because I was at a different stage of my life. Clearly, my expectations and my romantic ideas had changed throughout my life. So I'm really curious to ask you, when people come to you and ask them to plan their weddings, what's the difference between when they come to you, say in their 20s or 30s or 40s or 50s and beyond?
Yeah, interesting. So I've had my business for 27 years. And when I started, I'd say probably the average age of my clients was late 20s. Now, 27 years on, I'd say sort of like 10 years ago, it very much changed to more mid 30s, even to late 30s. So people are leaving things till later in life. And that's first wedding, first marriage I'm talking about. So I don't really now have much experience of people getting married in their 20s. People do, but if you were looking on the Office of National Statistics, the average age of couples is between 35 to 37 for getting married. Um, and, obviously, with a couple getting married for the first time, um, there kind of is expectation and there's the pressure for it to be this dream date. But I think most people have that. You want it to be as special as it can be. Um, and obviously, it's all new to them. With a second marriage or further, I mean, famously, I've done Joan Collins' wedding. Her fifth wedding was the one that I did, which is the one that's lasted. So hopefully, I'm a lucky mascot in that way. Um, I'd say that there's been a journey to that point, and I'm sure you'll advocate this as well, Andrea. It's maybe tinged by sadness, or it's not great times, or sometimes just relationships have broken down and there aren't many scars. But either way, finding love again and wanting to commit to marriage is still to be celebrated. And I think that maybe the key difference, I would say, isn't so much the couple, it's the guests, because they've been with you through whatever that journey was and are delighted to see the two of you together. And I would say that that's maybe, I don't want to take away from first weddings because of course they're massive celebrations, but there's a different kind of level, a different feel to a celebration of a couple who find each other, what you'd say, later in life.
That's so fascinating because I hadn't considered the guest experience. obviously in all of this. And again, I have really close girlfriends that we were laughing about it. Actually, we met up the other day, and we've known each other either since our teens or early 20s, and they were laughing, saying, we've been to all of your weddings, and they were all beautiful in their own way, but there was something really special about when you got married the last time, because it just felt so right and so
Mhm.
calm, and there was a feeling of coming together as adults with, yeah, you have, of course you have love and hope and expectation, but there's an element of reality and realism to it as well, which perhaps the hope and excitement kind of overshadows that when you get married when you're younger. Is that had been your experience?
Yeah, no, I'd agree with that, absolutely. And because obviously as we get older, we have more experience, we hopefully learn, don't we? And so, yes, in meeting somebody later on in life, you kind of, that phrase, yourself. And maybe if the mistakes have been made in your previous relationship, you're not going to make those again. And yeah, and I think that all contributes to, yes, just as I said about the guest experience, it's sort of, they've been there for that journey, just like your friends as well. And it's palpable, I think, when something is so right, when you're privy to a ceremony or a celebration, that it's just joyous to be there. You're the right fit. This is good, and it's lovely, isn't it, when you care about your friends? I'm sure it's been the same, with friends that perhaps you've got to married again. You are so pleased for them, aren't you? You don't want to see them on their own, and when you find that right person, it's you're lucky, and it's worth celebrating.
So one thing I'm interested in asking you as well is, what are the differences in the weddings themselves? So have you found that as people approach maybe their middle years or their later years, do the wedding ceremonies get smaller, or do they become more extravagant because they're at a different place in their life? What's the main difference?
Not a huge difference. I think there's a bit of a sort of assumption that perhaps when you're getting married for the second, third, whatever time, that it's going to be smaller because you've done the big shebang. If you did the first time, some people didn't. And I would say, I've done probably, I don't know, 50% of my clients are people who aren't married for the first time. So I've got quite a bit of experience in it. And the actual occasions are either big or small. If anything, I'd say they're perhaps slightly more tailored to the couple, often writing their own vows, and a big party, a big celebration, because again, you've sort of lived, what you enjoy. So maybe that would be a little bit more of a difference perhaps from first time around, but no real difference in the size. And often the bride won't wear a white gown again. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. Again, it can be a bit sort of been there and done that. They certainly don't wear the same dress again, and or recycle it. You always want to make it different to the other occasions. So, which I think by their very nature, and it's something I strive for with my clients, is that it's about putting their hallmark on their day. So the fact you are a new couple makes that a new celebration, but then, no, I've never had couples want to go back to the same venue they married at the first time, or use the same photographer or anything like that.
But even that has made me think of something. What about people who are renewing their vows? Maybe they did meet and marry when they were young, and they've been beautifully fortunate enough to reach middle years and beyond, and they want to renew their vows. Is this something that you have experience in?
Yeah, I've done a few of those, and again, just lovely to do. One couple in particular spring to mind, where I did their 20th anniversary, and yes, they'd got married in Leeds register office. Nothing wrong with it, but I think the whole thing cost about £300, if that. And now they wanted to have the occasion that celebrated, um, the fact 20 years together, but also what they couldn't do then. And we did the most amazing party at their house. It was just spectacular, with so many little personal touches, things about them. For instance, he was a motorbike enthusiast, so I had a nice emblem made of the two of them on a motorbike, and that was on the stationery. We had a fireworks and laser show with a frame with that. And there's just so many little things that you can bring in when you've been together as a couple for 20 years. And that one particularly springs to mind. And another lovely one I did over in France, where actually they hired a chateau. It was only maybe comparatively small, 50 or 60 people, so they could all stay in the one location. And that was lovely. They just partied till late at night and renewed their vows. So yeah, again, yeah, just joyous experiences. It's a wonderful thing to celebrate.
The word you've used often, and also the feeling that I have listening to when you talk about weddings, is joy. And there's a lot of cynicism around weddings, with obviously the economic economic climate being what it is, the cost of weddings. There can be, well, what's the point? You mentioned you can go to a registry office and do it for a lot less. I got married in a registry office and thoroughly enjoyed it. It was great. But I think that the key thing that people kind of forget about when you think about a union of two people that are standing in front of loved ones and proclaiming their love to each other and their unity with each other, is the joy, the absolute joy that weddings bring.
Absolutely. And what other occasion is there that people make the effort to be there for? At weddings, there always are guests from overseas or traveled from far. You know yourself, when you get a wedding invitation, you do your damnedest to go, don't you? And I don't think there is any other occasion in life that, yes, there's that opportunity to bring everybody together that way. And I think one of the things with it, particularly talking again about sort of second time around or third time around, whatever, is that experience of being there in that room with the 100, 150, whatever it is, number of people who are all there for you, who've been on that journey with you, is actually quite overwhelming. And I've often felt that. I mean, obviously, I'm in on the ceremonies. It's one of the privileges of my job. And it's never lost on me. It's a palpable feeling in the room. You may be sensed it, I'm sure, at your own wedding as well. It's I don't know how else to describe it. There's just a feeling, and it's lovely to be a part of that. And I feel very privileged in what I do. And last year there was a couple whose wedding I did. I think it was it their 25th anniversary? I think it was. They were one of the early weddings I did, and they live in America. And as a surprise to his wife, he'd arranged a Zoom with me. So he just called her into the kitchen that evening, poured champagne. I'd got champagne here. And 25 years later, we had an hour on Zoom together, just talking about the last 25 years. And I just thought, wow, it's just so lovely that they still remember me. I was a key contributor to that day. So yes, it is absolutely joyous. And not to name drop again, but one of the things, and I'm not telling tales out of school here, but one of the things Joan said to me was this was her first proper wedding. And obviously her and Percy have been married over 20 years now. And again, I just remember the applause in that room as she walked down the aisle before they even got married. They were sort of under pressure to go through with it at that point. So it doesn't matter, how many times it is, when you've got it right. And yeah, that's to be celebrated.
It's interesting that obviously you mentioned, Joan Collins, just one of the very famous people that you have helped them with their wedding day and their nuptials. Is there a difference between the emotion, the needs, the wants, what have you, between a couple who are in the public eye wanting to get married and someone who is not in the public eye wanting to get married? Or really, when it comes down to it, this is just a people thing? It doesn't matter what job they do, or is there a difference?
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right, Andrew, that there isn't a difference. It is a wedding. And the only difference is with a lot of the weddings that I've done, Joan's included, was we had to plan in secret. So yes, you're not sort of seen out in public. I've got sort of ways of when we post the notice, how we go about that, so the press aren't getting wind of it early doors and where it's happening. And obviously, if or not even necessarily if they're doing a magazine exclusive, just anyway, there's security, because you will have people try to get in. I've seen some incredible things of photographers literally burying holes in the ground 2 days outside of a wedding just to camp out. It's astonishing. Who'd want that job? But presumably if the photo sells, it's worth it. But no, that there isn't any difference. And I think, I've always been fortunate that they've all been lovely clients. So yeah,
what's the most ridiculous situation you've ever found yourself in when it's come to planning a wedding, whether it is a celebrity or otherwise?
Gosh, there's just so many different things, because unfortunately, whilst clients value through the planning, it's when something unplanned for happens, or even using the word disastrous happens, that you really come into your own, because you're there with the plan B, or there to salvage it. So yeah, I've had so many situations. I can think of, again, it's a celebrity one, but Greg Kinnear's wedding. They married at the church. His wife Helen was from Sussex, and they married at her local church. And when the banns were called, which they have to be in Church of England, I'd said to them then, because Greg Kinnear's his real name, somebody may twig. Anyway, they were adamant, didn't want security, etc. And then on the day of the wedding, I'd arrived at the church early with my photographer, and I saw this chap in the car park unloading his car boot full of kit, and I thought, oh golly, okay, here we go, here's a chap. So I have a couple of assistants. We do our best to sort of get in the way. I let Greg know when he arrived, got him in the church pretty quickly. And then the photographer went and got a wheelie bin and stood on it at the end of the sort of driveway, the walkway of the church, to get the shot as they came out. And my assistant got another wheelie bin, just stood up in front of him. So the things you find yourself in. But yeah, I mean, there's been so many situations. A lot of them I don't really like to recall, but there's always been a plan B. But I've had things like, once the groom had a car accident on the way to the church. I've had walls demolished 10 days before a wedding in the reception venue. But you know what? It's always worked out. There's always something that can be done. And you act as a buffer as well in that situation too.
What about the weather? Because obviously that's something that you can't control when it comes to your wedding day, particularly, summer weddings. And, you see it all the time on funny videos that go viral. I mean, they're funny to everybody else, clearly not to the bride and groom, where the wind's blown it away or the rain's lashing down. Or is this something that you've encountered?
Again, absolutely, wherever I am in the world, there's a plan B. So, if the couple really want to get married outside or have their reception outside, that's plan A. But there's always a plan B somewhere else it can happen. Or as I've done sometimes where we've hired, I can think of one where they wanted a pianist playing the Baby Grand at the entrance as the guests made their way up towards, it was a stately home, Brocket Hall in Hertfordshire. And we hired a Chinese hat, sort of gazebo style, for him, should the weather be bad. And yes, it turned up that day. The weather was great, turned away again. So the couple have paid for something that they may not need to use. But if you had needed to use it, it would have been worth it, because they'd have still have had the pianist outside. So no, I just never take it for granted. I think back even the one we did in the GMTV one in Rhodes. And remember, Liz and Tim got married outside, and the night before, Mary Jane Vaughan, the florist, was decorating the sort of arch they were marrying under. And the hotel said, yes, do it tonight. And I said, no, I think we should do it in the morning because, what if there's a storm or wind? And I can't remember now the manager's name at the hotel, but he was adamant, Siobhan, there'll be no problem. Don't worry. And it was like a 15-minute conversation going round in circles till eventually I said, okay, well, we'll get it done tonight, because obviously it was an early start, wasn't it, for broadcast? And of course, there was no wind or rain or whatever, but I'm so in that mindset that I couldn't leave it behind,
Yeah.
even in roads. Yeah.
Well, you've brought it up. I mean, clearly that's how we were first introduced to each other, was working in morning television together, and we did one of the first ever live weddings on
That's
morning
right.
television.
Yeah.
It was a huge thing. Obviously, I had worked with I doorstepped the bride and groom and to be, and surprised them and let them know they'd won this opportunity on television, and then there was all the planning and the building up to getting them married in Rhodes. Um, what was so beautiful about that wedding, and I still remember it with such fondness, was even though you would think, okay, so you've got a mixture of celebrity, you have live television, you're in a foreign country. There are obviously, you have all the bride, the groom, the guests, all of this. We had a cast of thousands in terms of the
I know.
production team that were there. There was so many people organizing this live OB from Rhodes, and yet somehow it still felt warm, friendly, intimate, joyous, lovely. It was one of the loveliest weddings that I've ever been
Mm,
to, considering it was this huge circus sort of behind the scene. And that's in no small part down to you and what you do. It just seemed to all run okay. It all went
yeah.
fine.
hmm Yeah, it was still, again, lots of personal touches, weren't there? And just, they were a fabulous couple, weren't they, as well,
Yeah.
Liz and Tim, and just so in love with each other, and still are, still in touch
Yes.
with Liz and Tim.
Yes.
And I think that's it. Once the ceremony starts, you don't notice the cameras. You're into it and into that moment. And that was it's my advice to every couple anyway, is take a moment when you get to the end of the aisle, breathe it, look around, take it in, absorb it, focus on the person marrying you, listen to those words, look at each other and what you're saying, because it goes like that. And it was my same advice to Liz and Tim. And so then you're in your own moment, albeit it's being filmed and broadcast to, I don't know, what was it, like 8 or 11 million? I can't
It
remember
was
now who watched it.
crazy.
It was popular, wasn't it? Yeah.
It was, it was. And you mentioned the word advice there. What would you say is maybe the top three bits of advice that you would give to anyone who is getting married, regardless of where they are in terms of, age, or whether they've done it before or anything else? What's the top three bits of advice that you would give them?
First one's so boringly practical, but it's a reality check, is to work out a budget, get an idea of what it's going to cost you. I wouldn't advise anybody to get married owing money, So if it means that to have the wedding you want, you need to delay it another year to save some more money, then do that. But have an idea of what you've got to spend and how you're going to spend it, because that alleviates so much pressure. And I would say to have that money ready. Don't let it be something that during the time you're sort of constantly scrabbling, put it aside and say, okay, that's our wedding budget. Um, and secondly, also to give yourself enough time, because you want it to be enjoyable. Most people tend to plan about a year in advance. My clients come to me sort of 8 to 12 months, but I've planned, my shortest one is 13 days was the turnaround for a wedding. So it can be done. But definitely to give yourself enough time, because then that helps you to enjoy it. And that would be my other piece of advice, is to enjoy it. It shouldn't be onerous. It shouldn't be another thing on your to-do list. It should be fun planning your wedding and making your day what you want it to be. And I often say to couples, if they're not using a planner, set aside an evening a week or a half day at the weekend that becomes your wedding planning time. So again, you're not trying to fit it between meetings or arguing over wording for your invitations or whatever. You've got this time where you sit down together with a cup of tea or a glass of wine or whatever, and work out what the next step is.
What would you say that is the most common mistake that people make when they're planning a wedding?
Gosh, I
Because
think.
the first thing, if this helps you out at
Mm,
all, because it was
mm,
just the question came into my mind when listening to what you were saying. And for me, I would assume the biggest mistake would be is that it's lopsided in that it tends to fall on one of the couple to do most of the planning. So then, and what can happen, I mean, I've been very fortunate, I'm not talking from personal experience here, but then there can be like a build up of resentment. Then there's a breakdown in communication. Then by the time you get to the actual wedding day, there's resentment, well, this isn't how I would have won it. Well, if you'd have spoken up earlier, then
mhm.
if you'd have put your hand in your pocket, then I wouldn't have been scrabbling around, and I suppose the thing that pops into my head is to just maybe make sure it's not lopsided, that you're both on board with, rather, even if one of you is going, oh, just do what you want, it'll be fine, I'll just turn up on the day. Like I've had friends whose partners
Mm.
have said that to them, I'll just turn up on the day, it'll all be fine. It won't be fine. This is supposed to be a union of two people, and it feels lopsided right from the start.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, actually, Andrew. Most of my couples do everything or most of it together, or sometimes, one's a bit more involved in one aspect of
Sure.
it than another. Um, and that's definitely a good thing for sure. But yes, I think maybe that could be it, where it feels it lands too much on typically the bride's shoulders.
Mm.
Um, that could be, yeah, one of the sort of stumbling blocks. But I think probably other than that, it would be, yeah, either not giving themselves enough time or not having sufficient funds. Do your research first and have a look at what things cost, because I know with my couples, one of the first things I do after we've had a consultation is send them a list of sort of typical wedding costs, because they've no idea. You're plucking figures out of nowhere. So it just helps to give them an idea then of how their money is going to be allocated, what different elements cost. Because, yeah, if you're doing it for the first time, you've really got no idea. It's a bit like decorating your home. If you've never done it, you don't know what wallpaper costs or a new loo or, a kitchen sink, do you? So, yeah.
From and finally, before we wrap up, I'm always very interested in the psychology behind how we think about things, and because to me, how every single thing that we do starts with how we think about it. So, what do you do or say to a couple on the big day when nerves are tight?
Mm.
People are feeling a little bit fraught. Maybe there's been so much expectation and they're losing that little bit of fluidity that, plans may have to change, and it might not be exactly to the T, this kind of dream wedding that you wanted. But if you can change your perspective on it, you can still have the most beautiful day. So what do you say to couples when, on the day and it's all getting a bit like this, to just reassure them and calm them down?
It's very much to be in the moment, absorb it, look how happy everybody is. It's that the day is going to play out. It is just going to happen. I'm there to ensure that that happens, but just to enjoy the moment. And that's certainly a conversation I have with them beforehand. But moreover, if I've got clients who are particularly anxious, say for instance, she doesn't like being the center of attention, then maybe walk down the aisle together. It doesn't have to be the bride's grand entrance, it can be the couple's grand entrance. With speeches, typically, obviously, the groom always makes a speech, but sometimes the bride. But if you're taking the scenario of a groom making a speech, if he's really nervous about it, we'll get it over either in the drinks reception or right at the beginning of dinner. Why prolong the agony? Some people just don't like to do that, and there's nothing wrong with it. And then my advice is then just keep it simple, do the thank yous, say how lovely she looks, done, sit down again. So I'd say it's more about, I help tailor the day that they're comfortable with. And one of the things I love is when we're doing the rehearsal, so typically if it's a religious ceremony and we're at the temple or the church or wherever, doing the rehearsal the day before. Obviously, generally I'm there a little bit ahead of them. I love it when I hear the chatter coming from outside the door, because they're arriving, together. The parents, the best man's arrived, bridesmaids, sometimes from abroad. Those are all the people involved in the rehearsal. And I love hearing that excitement in their voices. And I think, I've done my job, and they skip in and they're looking forward to the rehearsal. It's the start of it all. And I always feel a sense of satisfaction when that's how they're feeling about it. And it's something I strive for with my clients, is that it's enjoyable the whole way through. It's kind of my mantra that the planning should be almost as much fun as the day itself.
Brilliant. Oh my gosh, you're making me want to get married again.
It's a great thing to do, isn't it? Yeah. Man, just plan a wedding, Andrea.
Why not? I mean, to the same person, we're all good.
Yeah, absolutely. Of course.
So, Siobhan, if people want to reach out with you or in contact with you, or are you on Instagram? How can people find you?
Oh, thank you. Yes. So, yes, absolutely on Instagram with the rest of the world. So Siobhan Craven-Robins Weddings. And also, if you just Google me, my website will come up, which is under my own name, Siobhan Craven-Robins. Thank you.
Siobhan, it's just a delight to talk about weddings. Okay, I know I'm biased, but just like you say, it just makes you feel so full of joy and hope. And there are very few things in this world that are better than love. And really, a wedding is all about a coming together and a celebration, and standing in front of people who love you and you love them, and you are announcing to the world that this is the person you love above all others. And there is nothing more gorgeous than that.
Absolutely, I agree with you.
You have the best job in the world. You really do. I know it's the trickiest, and it can be the most exhausting and frustrating and everything else. But just listening to your voice and seeing your face when you talk about them skipping in during rehearsal and thinking, I have done my job. That's just wonderful. Thank you so much for today. I've really, really enjoyed it. And I know there's been so many takeaways for people. Thanks, Siobhan.
Oh, it's been a pleasure. Thank you, Andrea. Bye-bye.
I hope you've enjoyed today's midlife conversation. Make sure you like and subscribe this YouTube channel so you don't miss a single episode. And if you want to join in the conversation, head over to Facebook and check out Andrea McLean, This Girl is on Fire private Facebook group, where you can not only watch these videos, but join in the conversation as well. I'll see you next time.